Welcome back to Riley Every Day on the Sleepers Media YouTube channel. Today, I'm joined by a special guest. I have BYU head coach Kevin Young with me ahead of year two at the helm. And now, Young turned in a terrific first season in Provo. He led the Cougars to their highest win total since 2016. They also got to the second weekend for the first time since 2011. And he also cleaned up on the recruiting trail and in the portal. Got a couple high impact guys I'm sure we'll touch on today. But Coach, thank you so much for joining me. First thing I gotta ask, how's the summer been treating you and the team out in Provo?
Yeah, it's been good, man. It's been busy, balancing recruiting and workouts and academics and things like that, and trying to get our guys bigger, stronger, faster. So it's been action packed, and we're winding, things down here in the summer, but it's been really good.
Cool, cool. Yeah, one of the first things I wanted to ask you was just looking back at your first season. I would love to hear some of your biggest takeaways just transitioning from coaching in the NBA to coaching in college. Whether that's preparing for different styles of play or even subtle differences in rules, or even just working with college students as compared to working with veteran pros.
Yeah, man, a lot goes into it. I mean, I know this might surprise, I've been asked that question a lot, and my number one answer, honestly, is just the day-to-day life as a coach in college is wildly different than the day-to-day life in the NBA. And so, you're managing a lot more practices, you're planning a lot more practices. That in and of itself, it has took me some time to figure out. And I think that was a turning point in our season where we felt like we were able to make some ground, up as it related to our systems, how we were doing our player development, how we were structuring our practices and so forth. And then, of course, style of play is a lot different. The physicality, the officiating, the rules. I mean, all that stuff took time to adjust to. And then as it relates to the teaching relative to pros versus college players, I mean, I think the teaching generally is the same, but what might take a day and to get across in the NBA may take you a week in college and so forth. So just a little bit slower pace, but allows you to probably get a little bit more detailed, get a lot more reps in, and it's kept me sharp as a coach.
Yeah, and I know kind of going off of that, just looking at the difference, even you mentioning what might take a day in the NBA could take a week in college. I know that you've talked about, and the BYU socials team has put out videos of just instilling professional principles in your program, whether it's how you train, your nutrition, how you practice, your player development. What has been either the biggest challenge with that, or where do you think you're seeing the most success? I'll give you an open-ended one. You can talk about either or both.
Well, we're really lucky here, man. I my background gets a lot of the I think pub as it relates to the NBA, but I mean we have a lot of people on staff that have NBA experience. So our head strength and conditioning coach, Michael Davey, he was with the Milwaukee Bucks for, a long time, worked with Giannis. And so I think that's an area where we've really been able to move the needle. We've got guys who have put on, really the appropriate amount of lean muscle, guys we're still continuing to work on. So from a development standpoint, that part's been really, really good. And then just tying it all together, I think, one of my first hires was to hire a director of player development, a guy named Jordan Brady, who was a former G League head coach in his own right. And so, I think something we try to pride ourselves on is really developing the whole player and the whole athlete, not just on the court. Obviously, style of play is huge for us. On-court player development is huge. The nutrition, we have an NBA nutritionist that I hired, an NBA analytics guy I hired, right? And so Jordan ties all those arms of our development together. And so I feel like we've been able to, kind of make strides in a lot of different areas and not just solely have to hang our hat on one area of development or another.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I appreciate you shedding some light on that. And also kind of wanted to stay on the topic of last season for a little while longer. This is just more big picture looking at that the loss at Cincinnati early February. Seems like after that BYU flipped a switch, rattled off 9 straight wins, ultimately made the Sweet 16. What changed after that? Was there anything either team wise or you as a coach where you changed your approach or even strategically that you altered? Like what led to such a vast difference to close the rest of the season?
Yeah, I mean, we took one on the chin at Cincinnati, then we went over to West Virginia and got a huge win there. And that, and a lot of times in a given season, man, one win can really propel you and get some momentum. So getting that win on the road in West Virginia after getting beat by Cincinnati was huge because I just thought it showed a lot about our mental, toughness and ability to bounce back after a tough loss on the road, especially. And so, I think where it really came together was just toughness, man. Like West Virginia was a really tough team. And then we started, we played subsequent games after that against really tough and physical opponents. And so, answering the call there, I think really helped us. And we were able to, stack a couple wins together. And our guys got the momentum and, really got hot at the right time.
Mhm. So kind of related to that, something that I just noticed as this winning streak was going on, and maybe it ties to your greater philosophy as a coach. Usually when you see a team that rattles off a series of wins in February, even going into March, you think, okay, they're trimming the rotation, they're finding their core seven, core eight guys. But it seemed like some of those games you were playing 10, 11, maybe even 12 guys. It seemed like the rotation stayed around 10 for a lot of that win streak. What does that speak to just in terms of you as a coach with how you manage your roster, how you manage bench minutes, and is that something that you would even say might continue going forward?
Yeah, I mean that was I think what it speaks to is just being pliable, right? And just being finding what works for a given team. That was not really the plan going into the season, but I think honestly more than anything though it speaks to the types of guys we had in our locker room. Guys stayed ready. Guys took pride in what their specific role was on the team, and that's hard to, that's really hard to accomplish on any team in any sport. And so I give our guys all the credit for that, but um, I don't know. I don't know if that's something that we'll try to do moving forward. I mean, we feel like we're deep again this year, but maybe our high end talent's a little higher. So we'll have to see how it goes. I think as a coach, being able to, being able to bob and weave and kind of go roll with the punches and figure out, things on the fly, I think is really important. And so, yes, we have philosophies that we want to stick to, but sometimes the players teach you things that you need to, change and so forth. So we'll kind of see how this year plays out from that standpoint.
Yeah, that's a good transition to looking ahead to this upcoming season. I hinted at it at the top. You bring in two guys who I would say are stars, if not stars, at least have star potential in Rob Wright and AJ DeBonsa. And now y'all are integrating them alongside an established all conference guy like Richie Saunders. I just wanted to hear a little bit about that process, how it's been going so far, or even if there are any challenges associated with, bringing in these new guys with high expectations, combining them with a guy who's accomplished in his own right that maybe a fan would be surprised to hear.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's a challenge. Something I faced in the NBA where you get, three type of players on the same team. In theory, it's like, hey, man, or on paper, I should say, like it looks good and all that, but it's got to come together on the court. And so, we put a lot of time, energy, and effort into researching the human beings that we bring in here. We felt like Rob's personality, AJ's personality, would work well in a team environment, even though they're extremely talented. And then how would that affect Richie? We had some pretty frank and honest conversation with Richie how it would impact him and his role and his style of play. And this summer, man, we've tried to put those guys together as much as we can and allow them to kind of find their own chemistry. Still a major work in progress. We're not really even close to where, it needs to be. But they're all good, really good guys who are really good basketball players. And in my experience, when you have those components, it usually finds a way of working itself out.
Yeah, yeah. I actually want to kind of lean into Richie for a second here. Just even envisioning, I know Rob is like a true point guard. I think has some of the best handles in the country. Obviously, AJ is very talented on ball as well, can create separation out of a phone booth, and can score over anybody. Richie, to me, last year, he seemed like one of the best off ball players in the country. I thought he was an exceptional cutter, obviously, great spot up shooter, great movement shooter as well. Is that at least to me seems like it would yield to an easy transition with combining them together? But is there anything else on Richie's game that you want to highlight that he's been improving or working on, or even anything specifically you want to share about that trio?
Yeah, I mean, Richie's a guy who, he's a coach's dream from a standpoint of he's going to just get it out of the mud, man. You don't have to call much for him. He just finds ways to score and oh, by the way, does it at an extremely efficient clip. And so, that to me is the challenge where Richie's such an efficient player. Can we help Rob and AJ, be equally as efficient, and have it all sort of come together? And so, in theory, right, it feels good because Richie is so good without the ball. Rob and AJ are really good with it. I think the challenge for Rob and AJ is going to be how can they find ways to be effective as off-ball players as well, because they're not going to have the ball obviously the whole time. And then collectively, how does that work with everybody on the team moving it? Because that was a real strength of ours last year. And so, these are things that we talk about daily. Talked about it today actually. And it's just going to be the key to this particular team coming together.
Yeah, I love how you mentioned the ball movement. I know last year BYU ranked toward the top of the country in assist rate, 3-point attempt rate as well. Again, I'm just curious, is that something that you would say ties into your concepts that you're going to have with every team? Are you more so adjusting based on personnel, or is it even combination of both?
I think it has to be a combination of both, but I still think you have principles that you stand by. There's certain ones that you don't want to budge on that philosophically you feel great about, which for me is ball movement, is
Mhm.
spacing, is a offensive pace that's high. Those are things that I like and that I think my teams, I hope my teams will always kind of exhibit those qualities. But at the same time, you got to find ways to put your guys in a position to do what they do best. And obviously in team building, you hope that you can combine those two things and they become one. But there'll be things this year that we do this year that we didn't do at all last year. We just didn't have the creators that we now have, and so it gives you a little bit more flexibility. And there'll be times where maybe we match up Hunt a little bit more than we did in the past and so forth. But that's the fun part, I think, in coaching, especially in this era in college basketball where you've got, a lot of change on a given season. And so it really, I think, you got to be, like I said, flexible. Like I mentioned earlier, you got to be flexible, and we'll try to do that.
Yeah, yeah. And now we've talked about that top three, the three, I guess, soon to be household names if they aren't already. But I also wanted to ask, is there any under the radar player on the roster that you think fans or even media need to take note of?
I mean, I'm really happy with the group we put together. It's hard to single, anybody out. I mean, every guy we've brought in to this point has had, a day or multiple days where they've really stood out. Kennard Davis coming in from Southern Illinois. I mean, we brought him in to, hopefully really impact our team on the defensive end and then be a player that can play around AJ and Richie and Rob, and he's done that. But he's an even better defensive player than I thought. I mean, he has some really unique stuff about him defensively. Xavion Staten, who's a freshman that we brought in with AJ in that class. I mean, he's really developed. He's been here since late April and been really happy with his trajectory, what we've seen out of him. I think he's got a bright future as an NBA player in short order. And there's several other guys we got, out of the portal that have been impressive, but been impressive. One other guy we'll probably have to mention is Hadim Mbop. He redshirted for us last year. He's had a tremendous summer. He's looked really good, kind of a Tasmanian devil. He's at 6'9", 225, physically imposing. So he's a guy that I'm excited about as well.
Cool, cool. Well, last question for you, Kevin, and that's this. What is something that would surprise fans to know about Big 12 basketball? And maybe that involves game prep or travel or even the grind of playing in a league that's so focused on defense. What's something that might surprise the fans?
Man, it's something that might surprise him. I think just I was impressed with some of the venues that we went to. It's hard when you're just on film, to get a real sense of the environment. At West Virginia was an incredible environment. At Iowa State was an incredible environment. At Arizona was an incredible environment. And so I give my hat a hat tip, if you will, to just the other universities in the Big 12 that put together awesome game day atmospheres. Obviously, we have I think one of the best ones here at the Marriott Center at BYU, but was really impressed with what we saw when we went on the road.
Cool. Thank you for your time, Coach. I appreciate it. And of course, best of luck this upcoming season.
Riley, thanks, man. Appreciate you having me on.